I'm Dwayne Collins with Texsource Screen Printing Supplies. Today we're going to talk about one of the most loaded questions I get when I'm out on the road seeing customers. What mesh count do I use for different artwork? You know, the higher the detail, the more fine the mesh is going to be. The lower the detail, you know, you're going to get by with 40s, 60s. The main thing that a 40 is used for is to do Kristalinas and glitters. If you're going to print glitter, a 30 or a 40 is where you want to be when you're printing glitters. And we're going to show you some prints after we get done going through the meshes. We're going to show them to you on the wall. A 60 will do a lot of your different, you know, if you got some glitter, it's got some fine detail to it, you can get by with a 60 mesh, but a lot of it is going to hang up in the mesh. Now, if you want to get detail from it, you can always use a shimmer because it's a smaller flake and it'll go through this 60 mesh a lot better. You can also use an 86 for a shimmer, but I would recommend a 60 for shimmers. Then we come down and we got our old standby, a 110. You know, most printers, when they first start out printing, they use 110s, and a lot of shops will still use 110s to lay down white and print, flash and print. Then you come into a 125. You know, 125 is just going to lay down a little less ink and give you a little finer hand as far as the feel of the shirt when you're printing white ink. So a lot of people go to 125s and 160s. Okay, now we're at 160s. Now if you look at your 160s, most of your 160s are good for, like if you're printing on a white underlay, you can print your colors on top through a 160 and lay less ink down. Also, a 160 is what most manufacturers print in water base or plastic charge from Union. You can print them through a 160 where you don't put as much ink down, where you can dry it easier. If you used a 110 to do discharge, you would actually put so much water in the shirt it would really be hard to dry. So use a 160 up to about a 196 and you'll dry it a whole lot easier. Then we're going to talk about 196s, 200s. You know, when you get into detail, and I'm going to show you some artwork here in a few minutes, and I'm actually going to lay them out on these screens. So when you're looking at artwork, pencil size lines, small lines, go up into the 196s, 200s, and you can even go up as high as 305s. Now, if you look at this artwork in these tire tracks, they're nothing but dots, but then the car is big and bold. So when you take this mesh count, I would actually probably run this on a 180 to a 200 because the dots are large, and then I can still lay ink down pretty good. So that artwork right there, it's tough because it's got a big bold print and then it has small dots. So this is where you kind of have to cut the middle, and I would probably run this on a 180 or a 200. I'm going to lay it over here. Now, this is a 305 mesh. Now, let me go through this artwork. Okay, fine lines. These fine lines and dots and everything that's in this print, I would put this on a 200 to a 305. So remember, the finer the dots, the higher the mesh count. And let's see. Okay, here's another print that could be run. This one I would most likely put on a 160 because it's not a ton of detail, and it was printed and it was using a max opaque ink, which is a heavy bodied ink. So I would want to open enough mesh to where I could get this detail and still be able to print it. This is a big and bold print. If I was going to print a glitter, I would actually put this right here on this 40 mesh, and this is what I would use. Because remember, I said big, bold print. Because glitter has a tendency to block up in certain areas when it's a fine print. So you want big and bold on a 40 mesh. A 60 mesh, you could do this on a 62. But when you start moving up into 110s and stuff like that, you know, and you're trying to print gooder, it's not going to work. I see a lot of people trying that, and it's hanging up in the mesh. Okay, this is a Kristalina, just a straight Kristalina printed on a black shirt. It's printed through a 40 mesh. And when we did the artwork, we got a little too close in here, and I've noticed when I print it, I lose these little corners a lot of times in the edges. So it's a really hard print because it's so small. If I would have made this bigger and made the butterfly's wings a little bigger on the edges, it would have made for even better print. Okay, this is a Kristalina overprint. What we did was we printed 4 colors on this, and then we went back over top of it and put a Kristalina through a 40 mesh just over top of the print. So, you know, you can use it as an accent product. That's really what Kristalina was made for. But remember, you're going to print, we printed these at high mesh counts. They were probably in the 200 range, and then came back on top with a 40 with Kristalina. Now, we talked about 160 mesh, and I said that was a good mesh for if you were printing underlays and you were coming on top of it with different colors, that it would make a better hand feel because your white's going to always be heavy. But this is also something else you can do too. All this here is discharge. Some of it's straight water based and some of it's plastic charge. So, you know, a 160 mesh up to about a 200 is where you need to be on this because you don't want to lay down too much ink because remember, it's half water. So what it does is it soaks into the garment and you have to dry it back out. If you go down to a 110 or something like that, you're going to have a really major hard time drying it out. So make sure you use a 160 and up to do your discharge and water base. Okay, we were talking about detail. You know, to get this type detail, you're going to be no lower than probably a 180 all the way up to 305s. You know, all these shirts were done with very high mesh counts up to 305. And if you look at these shirts, they're nothing but dots. That's all this print is dots. So to get those dots, you have got to burn them on a high mesh count to be able to wash them out and maintain the dots in on your screen. Because what you get on the screen from the artwork is what you're going to have as a final product when you put it on a shirt.